Listen, can you hear it? The breath of the land. For 1,000,000 years, this was the rhythm of this place. The slow inhale of the winter rains, the long, dry exhale of the summer sun. This peninsula, at the very tip of a vast continent, was not an end, but a heart. And its lifeblood was the water that flowed from its great stone mountain, a mountain the first people called Riebeeck, the mountain in the sea. But in the middle of the 17th century, a new sound was about to arrive. The sound of a clock, the sound of a hammer, the sound of a fever dream from which this land would never truly awaken. This world was not empty. It was simply unwritten. Its history was not kept in books, but painted onto the secret walls of caves and carried in the clicks and whispers of its people. The San, the hunter-gatherers, were the oldest of all. They moved through this landscape like ghosts, their bodies lean and tough, their eyes holding the wisdom of millennia. For them, time was the cycle of the moon and the migration of the eland. They were the land's memory. And then there were the Khoikhoi, the men of men. They were the masters of this coastline. Clans like the Goringhaikwa, the Gorachukwa, and the Kochokwa. They were pastoralists, their entire world revolving around their herds. Their wealth, their status, their very souls were tied to their cattle. They lived in semicircular villages of Machia Shuiza, dome-shaped homes woven from reed mats over a frame of pliant branches. At night, the firelight from within would make them glow like soft lanterns against the immense, star-filled dark. They knew the sea strangers. For decades, their ships had limped into the bay, their crews sick and desperate. A Goringhaikwa man named Auchumato, whom the English had nicknamed Harry, had made himself the indispensable middleman. He had learned scraps of their harsh languages. He understood their desperate need for fresh meat. He would trade, but on his own terms. Auchumato was a man who walked between worlds, profiting from the strange thirst of these pale men. When their sails vanished over the horizon, the land's ancient breathing would resume. He had no reason to believe this time would be any different. But a new kind of thirst was coming, a corporate thirst. The Dutch East India Company, the VOC, was the most powerful corporation the world had ever seen. Its ships were conquering the spice trade, but its profits were being eaten by a disease born of the sea, scurvy. The company needed a permanent cure, a stopover, a vegetable patch. The man for the job was Jan van Riebeeck. His mission, given to him by the faceless directors of the company, was simple. Do not colonize, do not conquer. Build a fort for protection, barter for cattle, and most importantly, plant a garden. A garden to feed the passing ships and defeat the scurvy. He was a gardener with a sword. The first years were a struggle for survival. The winter winds tore at their fort. The summer sun baked their crops, and the barter for cattle was a constant source of frustration for Van Riebeeck. He saw the thousands of cattle owned by the Khoikhoi and could not understand their refusal to trade them all. He wrote in his journal with exasperation, failing to grasp the truth. For a European, cattle were a commodity. For a Khoikhoi, they were life itself. You do not sell your soul for a piece of copper. By 1657, Van Riebeeck realized the company could not rely on trade alone. He needed his own farmers. He released 9 soldiers from their contracts and declared them free burghers. He gave them land to farm for the company. It was prime grazing land, land the Khoikhoi had used for centuries. This was the moment the mission changed forever. The refreshment station was becoming a colony. The temporary visitors were putting down roots. And then came the barrier. A hedge of bitter wild almonds was planted. It was meant to keep the Khoikhoi cattle out of the Dutch crops. But it was more than that. It was a line drawn on the earth, a physical manifestation of a European idea. This land is mine, and that land is yours. It was a concept utterly alien to the Khoikhoi. The land belonged to no one. The hedge was not a fence. It was an insult. And one man understood the meaning of that hedge better than anyone. A Goring Haikwa warrior named Doman. Unlike Auchumato, Doman had been taken by the Dutch to Batavia, the heart of their empire in the east. He had seen the truth of Dutch power. He had seen how they consumed land and subjugated people. He returned not as a collaborator, but as a prophet of resistance. He looked at the small fort, the expanding farms, and the hateful hedge, and he saw the future. He saw the end of his world. In 1659, Doman's warnings exploded into action. This was not a war of armies and flags. It was a war for grazing land and water. Doman united several Khoikhoi clans in a brilliant campaign of guerrilla warfare. They avoided the fort. They targeted the isolated farms of the Free Burghers, the source of the Dutch trespass. They were fighting to reclaim what was theirs, to erase the lines the Dutch had drawn on their land. Van Riebeeck was thrown into a panic. His farmers were terrified, their livelihoods destroyed. He wrote that the Khoikhoi were like smoke, impossible to catch. Doman's strategy was working, but the Dutch had one supreme advantage: the Fort de Gode Hoop. It was a bastion they could always retreat to, a stone anchor in a hostile sea. The Khoikhoi could win the skirmishes, but they could not land a decisive blow. The war lasted for a year, a slow burn of raids and fear. But the disruption was too great for the Khoikhoi way of life. They sued for peace. In the negotiations that followed, Doman confronted Van Riebeeck directly. "Who," he asked, "should we let have this land? The rightful owners or the foreign invaders?" Van Riebeeck's reply would echo for centuries. He said the land had been won by the sword, and by the sword it would be kept. The war was over. The question of ownership had been answered. "10 years. In just 10 years, a garden had become a fortress. A transaction had become a conquest. The fever dream had taken root in the soil. Jan van Riebeeck left the Cape, his mission a success in the eyes of his company. But he left behind more than a port of call. He left a wound, a tiny, permanent European settlement clinging to the edge of Africa, its foundations built on a profound and violent misunderstanding. The first decade was over. The story of South Africa had begun.